has been brought to you by the letter F.
All right, so here we are at the letter F for formation processes. What are formation processes? Formation processes are basically all of the things that happen to an artifact or human remains, whatever we find as archaeologists, all of the things that happened to make that thing in the state it is today, or to make that site in the state it is today. And there are two types of formation processes: cultural formation processes and natural formation processes. Cultural formation processes are what people do to the stuff we find. Natural formation processes are what Mother Nature does to the stuff we find or the site we find, leaving it in the state we find it today. Now, cultural formation processes are basically what archaeologists study. It's human activity. So if you want to know what humans did to a thing, you look at the chaîne opératoire from episode C of the ABCs, which talks about all the things that people can do, the processes that they perform upon an object from its creation to its deposition. Now, the one that really throws people off is the natural one. You might wonder, do we as archaeologists even care about natural formation processes? Isn't that for like meteorologists to worry about the weather, or climatologists to worry about the climate, or geologists to worry about what the soil's doing? That's not our job as archaeologists.
Wrong!
The real answer is that formation processes are critical to interpreting and understanding the sites that we find. And the reason for this is we want to avoid something called the Pompeii premise. Now, this is the idea that people assume when they find a site that it's just sort of frozen in time.
You're frozen when your heart's not open.
This comes from the ancient Roman city of Pompeii, which was sitting right at the foot of Mount Vesuvius. And Mount Vesuvius blew its top, exploded, all that ash covered the city and killed everyone living there. And it kind of stayed that way because it was covered in ash. So if you go there, which I have, they're even sort of the bodies which were covered in ash still sort of in suspended animation. And that's great if you find a site like that. Not great that the people got killed, but finding a site that is just sort of frozen in time because you don't have much work to do. You can sort of see everything as it was. The issue, archaeological sites are almost never like that. So we do have to understand these natural formation processes, whether we like it or not. Don't believe me? Let me give you some examples for how this can go wrong. Let's take European societies over time in ancient history. So if you look at the Iron Age, Bronze Age, early medieval ages, you see a movement of settlements. It's almost like a little back and forth dance. In places, settlements move up the hill and down the hill, and up the hill and down the hill. And a lot of that has to do with instability, danger, violence. In times of danger, violence, instability, people tend to move uphill because at a higher elevation, you can see what's coming. You have the high ground, so it's easier to defend. In times that are easy and secure, people will be lower down in the valley so they can be closer to water, so they don't have to haul ass uphill all the time. Just makes more sense from a convenience factor. Now, let's think about the times when the settlements were up on top of the hills, like hill forts or something else like that. They're just up higher. Now, those people should leave plenty of traces, right? And everything will be very easy to find right there on top of the hill.
Wrong!
What happens over hundreds, thousands of years as it rains? What happens? The stuff that people have left on that hill, or even the buildings, will slowly get washed down the hill. So for this reason, really ancient spots that were on a hill, often the place you'll find the most stuff is at the bottom of the hill. If you didn't know anything about formation processes, you'd totally miss that. Or let's take animals, because animals can really mess you up if you don't know what you're looking at. So the last summer, I dug on an Iron Age site here in England. And in digging my pits, I did a couple, I came into some pretty big voids that actually, to the trained eye, were animal layers, like badger holes or something like that, groundhogs. Now, these critters are known to take stuff from one context and bring it to another. Now remember, in archaeology, a context is a layer, and that basically corresponds to a certain time period. And unless you're having some pretty funky stuff going on, the lower the context, the older it is. So if you think about it, a badger moving stuff from one context to the other can get pretty confusing. Let's say Iron Age to early medieval. Well, the issue is in England, actually, the pottery from these two times can look quite similar. So things can get pretty confusing because of those little critters.
That funny?
Scavengers. Scavengers are another one. So you know what those are. Those are animals that feed off of dead things. You'll often see this in battles, right? If you watch Game of Thrones, the crows come, the dogs come, and they chew up the bodies. And when that happens, the fancy archaeological term for that is disarticulate the bones, for example, if they rip apart the skeleton. Now, in very old sites, Paleolithic, oftentimes people would find animal bones in either like human encampments and settlements or among human bones. And they assumed that the humans hunted these animals, and that's what we were looking at here. Well, after a time, once osteological practice had become more regularized and sophisticated, it actually turned out that the animals were killed by other animals. They could tell that with the teeth marks and the wounds. And it was the people kind of coming and picking up the leavings. It was the people who were scavengers in this case. So we as human beings have come a long way. Finally, another really good example, because they're everywhere, are earthworms. Earthworms are really good for the soil because they're constantly digging around, aerating it, digesting stuff, excreting it, and that keeps the soil healthy. Well, as that activity goes on and the soil kind of churns, things actually sink down in the ground. So things that are heavy and dense will sink over time because of the activities of earthworms. So if you think about a bunch of material that's kind of sitting there, let's say some pottery, which is very friable.
If you put in too much at once, it's going to lower your oil temperature.
Friable is a fancy archaeological term for crumbly. So crumbly, light pottery around some heavier objects, something metal maybe. Over time, the activity of those earthworms will cause the heavier, denser stuff to sort of sink below. So you might actually have metals and pottery from the same time, but in different contexts because of the activity of earthworms. Buildings sink because of the activity of earthworms. And I can't think off the top of my head what the rate is, but they actually have calculations in different parts of the world for how much things will sink over time based on the activity of earthworms. So I think that's pretty nifty, not to open up a whole other can of worms. So those were some pretty basic examples. Formation processes can actually become very, very complicated with things decaying and chemical reactions over time, things degrading. But those are some pretty simple examples, and they should give you an idea of why formation processes and understanding them are so important. So if you want to interpret a site, you got to know your natural formation processes. And of course, sort of the cultural formation processes are kind of what you're studying. So there you have it. F is for formation processes. Hey, if you like what you heard, give me that thumbs up below, hit that bell to subscribe, or if you want to support more independent archaeology content, consider contributing to my Patreon, where you can enjoy some exclusive members-only benefits and other goodies. Until the next dig.